first Product Coffee live stream. Welcome. Glad you could join us this morning. I know it's early, but we are going to follow up on yesterday's Product Coffee meetup, where we had Jon Harmer, who's a product manager over on the Gmail team at Google, join us and talk about what it's like to be in product management in Google and some of the lessons he's learned along the way. Well, we had a whole bunch of questions come in and couldn't get to them all. And we were going to start doing a bunch of back and forth in the LinkedIn group, but there were so many questions. John and I decided it'd be a good idea to just come on here and do a live stream for our Product Coffee fans who are in the LinkedIn group or on the mailing list, and share this out with you so you could get answers to the questions that we didn't get to. So I'm going to jump right in here and bring John on. And hey, John, good morning. Caught you just as you were taking a bite. And I drained my coffee, so I might get off screen here in just a minute and refill it as well while you're going long on a question. But let's get started really quickly. Just as a recap, we talked about a lot of things yesterday, and you brought up some really good conversations about some examples of prioritization at Google and saying no to the right things and saying yes to only the most important things. But one of the questions that came up from Beth in our audience yesterday was, how do you actually, when you're starting a new product, do you have something that John does or that's a Google approach to just establishing that initial product vision? How do you come up with a vision for a new product these days?
I don't think it has to be only for new products. I think you can, this is something that can be done sort of periodically. What is the vision for the product that you already have? And so I think it's probably a lot of the sort of core product things. You talk to customers, you look at the usage, you understand the competitive landscape, you sit and do smart people thinking, you imagine the possibilities, and the Google part is imagining the possibilities of how could you radically improve the situation for your users, even if it's just a thought exercise of how do I make this 10x better, right? I don't know that there's some magic formula for making a vision necessarily. Okay. But I think it's all informed by the regular things that product managers tend to do.
That makes sense. That actually, you mentioned the 10x thinking, and Amanda wanted to know, how do you balance that? 10x thinking is a really inspiring concept, and it makes a lot of sense. It gets beyond that basic incremental thinking. But sometimes incremental improvements are important. How do you balance that incremental improvements with the 10x thinking?
Yeah, the way that I've seen it so far is you're on that 10x path and you're getting there incrementally. So it's not necessarily that I'm going to do some 10x things and then this other set of projects are going to be the incremental things. It's if I waited to get the perfect 10x thing, then that's the whole gold-plated, never going to get there kind of a thing, waiting forever to realize value. And so you incrementally your way to the 10x vision, basically.
Okay. All right. So you really focus on the long-term outcome, but then look at the small steps along the way to get there. So it's not so much a balance as an integration.
Yeah. And everything should be driven by that outcome-based thinking, right? Don't focus, lost for words. Don't get stuck just focusing on that one set of activities. All of these activities need to, obsess was the word I was trying to think of, need to be in the service of that further longer term outcome.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay, cool. So that's good. So staying on that theme for just a minute more, there is a need to prioritize when you have lots of choices. And you talked a little bit yesterday about prioritization and some of the approaches that you take to that. But at the same, you also talked about some of the tools you use in Google. You use Google Sheets a lot and Google Docs a lot with heavy commenting. But when it comes to actually making prioritization choices, whether you're talking about the incremental steps or big new initiatives, what are some of the things that you do? How do you approach prioritization as an art and a science?
Yeah, so I am of the opinion that anybody gives you a formula or a spreadsheet that allows you to calculate your priorities automatically is just giving you the sense of certainty for something that is still just art. So don't do that, or do that, but do it with understanding the limitations of the situation. So the way I think about prioritization is I try to focus on the things that I think they're going to have the biggest impact. And I know that's like a super oversimplistic version of the answer, but it legitimately is what we're doing. So I think of the projects I'm trying to plan for next year, and it's based on my user feedback and the behavior I see my partner customer feedback and the behavior I see of the users in the system. Which things aren't working the way we thought they would. What changes do I think we can make to solve those problems better? And which of those is going to have the biggest impact? Because even at a big company, you never have as many resources as you want to have.
Right.
You can't do all the things. And so being, again, ruthlessly prioritizing the things that are going to have the biggest impact. So there's a few things that I put on the list, and my manager was like, hey, do you really need to do that? Like, is that really going to drive the results for next year? And I was like, well, maybe not, but I really want to do it. He's like, yeah, but let's put, those two engineers on this project, make that project happen better. And so it's that constant refining process in your head and on paper of what is literally the next most important thing to do.
Right. And as you're thinking through that, I was having a conversation with a colleague yesterday, as a matter of fact, and one of the things that we were really kind of working through is there are sometimes things that need to be done that don't necessarily need to be done by you. So I'm really interested to know, when you encounter those kinds of issues, do you have the build partner by discussion, or is the partnership primarily within Google? How do you approach it when you have something that needs to be done but doesn't necessarily need to be done by your team on your initiative?
Yeah, I mean, I have one thing in my head that is on our not yet published roadmap, so I can't talk exactly about what it is. That's but I had an idea for an enhancement that I thought would make our users' experience better. Basically, like putting in since it's third-party integrations into Google Workspace. So I'm creating a platform and a set of capabilities that then partners can utilize. And so one of the things I thought about doing was creating a framework inside of that for allowing these people to have a first-time user experience, onboarding tutorial kind of experience. And we create the framework, and then they would populate it with their content and do that. And I thought that would improve my users' experience first time through. Good morning, Jay. And then it would improve our utilization long term, because if people understand how the thing works, it's better. Then one of my developers, without knowing that was the thing I was planning for next year, went and created, not one of my developers, one of our partners, created that same experience inside of our framework using the existing functionality. So basically they just created a special version of the interface for the first time a user goes through, and it walks you through, and it has some animated GIFs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they are already empowered to do this themselves. I don't need to spend any engineering effort on this whatsoever. If we just put documentation and point to some examples, we will have solved the problem with zero effort, right?
Yeah.
And there's tons of times when you can, if you just think about it differently, the whole manual MVP, concierge MVP concept from Lean Startup, right? Is there a human solution to this technical problem? Can I throw some bodies at it temporarily to prove that to prove out my assumptions, which brings me to a tangent that I don't know if I mentioned yesterday. The great Scott Selhorst came up with this framing where it's like a graph. For anything you're planning to do, there is some set of assumptions baked in, and you have a level of confidence in those assumptions from gut feel, which is useful but shouldn't be considered as strong confidence, all the way up to proven user behavior shows that this is a thing that absolutely is true, right? So, and there's gradations in between. So how confident are you in your assumptions? And then the other axis is how bad is it? How costly is it if you're wrong about those assumptions, right? And so if you sort of analyze all your decisions on that, you come to this place where you're like, I'm pretty sure we need to do this. And if I'm wrong, it's really expensive. So in that point, that situation, what you do is you pay to learn. And so you do something to increase the confidence of your hypothesis. Instead of building the thing, which may be very expensive if you build the wrong thing. You spend engineering effort, you have whatever, PR, brand badness, whatever the cost is of that situation. So pay to learn first in the situation where you're not confident in your assumptions. And so that, like, some of those manual solutions fall into that pay to learn kind of a thing. Like, can I validate my assumption, less expensively, more quickly, such that it's easier to prioritize the right work later. That was a very long answer, but hopefully.
That's good. And Jay is on the stream as well. Jay joins us almost every week for Product Coffee, and he had a follow-up question actually that he asked as you were going through that. So who actually owns that going forward?
Which that? I said a lot of things.
You were talking. You were talking about that testing, or that taking that hypothesis and actually testing it so that you don't overinvest. Who owns that going forward?
I would say that the product manager owns the idea that you need to do that, and then it depends on your organization who owns the doing of that. In my team, we have some manual resources we can leverage. Either it's developer relations people, or we have like review teams for some of the integrations, or, stuff like that, where we can put some manual effort behind it. But that's it's coincidence that we own those teams. Like, very easily that could have belonged in some other organization. So, you have some resources, whether they report to you or not, that hopefully can help you own that. But you own the hypothesis. And you own validating that hypothesis and using whatever resources you have available to you.
Okay, gotcha. One of the things that, just kind of as an aside here, you talk about teams quite a bit, and the teams seem to have a great variability in size with the projects that you're working on.
Sure.
Is there kind of a scope that you think from that a team would actually not ever be any larger than a certain size, and is there a team of one?
I mean, yeah, even within Google, there are small teams and large teams, or within large teams, there are smaller sub teams. There's definitely teams of one, or teams of a small handful, like 5. And then the Gmail team itself is hundreds. I don't even know actually how many people it is, but it's relatively large.
Sure.
So, what was the question?
Well, I was just getting a sense for, and I'm also probably using interchangeably the concept of teams and then squads, like smaller groups that are working on a specific aspect or a specific feature as well. So I was
we don't necessarily organize in the formal Spotify squad way, but it's not super different than that. The spirit of that, at least.
Okay.
And yeah, I think there's the expectation that at different levels of product management within Google, and when I mean, like, we have the ladder, L3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc., where your scope, which is one of the things you're measured on as a product manager, that I don't think I mentioned yesterday, increases as you go up. And so, you could be expected to have to work with 20 or 30 engineers at certain levels, or a team of 5 or 6 at certain lower levels, right? And so that team sizing, that squad sizing, that scope of influence for product managers changes. Not surprisingly, the further you go up in the organization.
Okay, that makes sense. So did that get you, Jay? Did that get your answer? Anybody else that's watching the stream? It looks like we got a couple of other people watching. Say hello, and if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat, and we'll get to them as we kind of go through this. And when we run out of questions, we'll pretty much stop unless we want to talk and decide to do something else. So yeah. So Tim Hernquist asked yesterday. He said, if you're the voice of the customer, how do you go about collecting the inputs to create that knowledge base? How do you create that voice, collect that voice in order to drive the most impact?
That's a great question. So my role in Gmail is relatively unique in that it is very much outward facing, working with partners and stuff like that. And so I get to cover the breadth of the kinds of answers I think there could be to this question. So I personally end up meeting one-on-one with many of our developer partners. So I think I don't know what the number is at this point, 50 or 60 or something that I've met with in the past, quarter or two. Direct, 30-minute, hour-long, whatever it takes meetings, talking to them, understanding their developer experience, where our platform and the framework is or isn't meeting their needs, the kinds of things they'd like to see in the future, the kinds of things we're planning on in the future to get feedback. So it's like, I want to respect both of our times in those meetings and make sure that I get the most value and that they get some value too. So it's a little bit of vision casting forward and a little bit of data collecting from them. Then we have the ability to interact with some of our large paying customers because we have, people like account managers managing those relationships, and they're large. And so they have, unique needs and or specialized needs depending on the industry they're in. And so I get to interact with those people and understand a lot of these large customers build custom solutions in-house that sit on our same framework. And so I can interact with them in that sort of direct first person kind of a way. Outside of that, I don't get the chance to, there's not an easy way to talk to average Gmail customers. I mean, I could talk to Jason. He's a Gmail user. I could talk to my wife. She's a Gmail user, but that's not, it's not a scalable 2.6 billion monthly active users of Gmail. So I can't talk to all of them. And so in that case, what you do is use the instrumentation metrics that exist, right? You observe their behavior as opposed to listening to the words. There's also feedback channels built inside the tools so that users can leave feedback if they want to. That is, we then comb through and or aggregate. And then there's also teams of UX researchers who do things like, targeted focus group things or one-off, one-on-one research projects where they'll, interview a series of 5 or 10 users and take them through a scenario and see how they behave, or survey type things, and all the different tools available to a researcher. Our user research teams are well versed in and have access to. And honestly, it's a limited resource, just like our developers are. Like, you have to come up with a good reason. Yeah. And you have to, multiple times I've had the conversation with my researcher. What decision is going to be made based on the data you're collecting, or are you just trying to collect it because it would be nice to know? Right. And if you can't define a decision, like if it goes X, you're going to do Y with the product. And if it goes, B, you're going to do Z with the product. Then why are you doing the research, right? So we use all the things as best we can, and I know not everybody has access to that same level of resources. Yeah. So instrumentation is probably the easiest thing for most people to do. Figure out what you can do and get the best data you can. Talk to people in person if you can. Yeah, right. I think our friends over at Pragmatic frequently say, nothing important happens in the office. So talking to those customers is not inside this building. Yeah, right. Yes, that is correct. But with 2.6 billion users, it kind of does create a little bit of a scaling challenge to actually get out there and do that directly. Instrumentation is important. You talked about how you interact and collaborate a little bit with your research team. How about with your design team? How do you interact and collaborate with your design team? Cholito wanted to know about that. Yeah, it's a very close collaboration. We do everything together largely, right? So I come up with some crazy idea. I go to my designer. He tells me that my crazy idea isn't crazy enough and makes it even crazier, or tells me to get off the ledge and back up and let's do something more sane. And then we sort of iteratively go back and forth, and either we'll whiteboard something, or in these days digitally whiteboard something, or he'll throw some mocks together, or I'll have what I call PM mocks, which is always put the caveat: no designers were harmed in the making of this PM mock. Just so people don't have strong expectations for the level of quality, because I'm not a designer.
No.
And so it is a very, very, very close collaboration. Even in something that we have, which is a platform. Like I don't exactly control all of the user interface because I'm allowing developers to make a thing.
Yep.
So we put together like theoretical mocks with a core like industry use case. Like CRM is a big use case for us, or like project management, task management is another big use case. Those are the kinds of things you'd want to integrate into email. Kind of makes sense. And so we'll put together fake task management app X, or we'll even do a mock with an actual customer who makes software like that. But I'm not going to play favorites, so I won't say any names out loud.
That's okay.
We do that, and then that helps, especially with things like our dynamic mail product, where you're baking these new kinds of interactions into the message. Having those visuals really helps tell the story, and it makes it real for people. Same thing with the platform things. It makes it real for leadership. It makes it real for my development teams, so they can better understand what it is we're trying to get done.
Okay, cool. So
going into long answers today, Jason.
No, hey, that's okay. We got all the time that you've got. I have no meetings following this live stream this morning. I'm good until noon, so we can go all morning. But I've only got a couple more questions, at least from the prepared questions, and we might see something else come in the chat in a moment. But Jay, actually, who's on right now, also, yesterday was asking if there was an operational component to what you do as a product manager at Google, besides just strategy and implementation. Is there an operational role that you play at Google that you have to balance as well?
How do you define operational, Jay?
It's a great question. Yeah.
Probably. So some departments, some areas at Google have something very much like product operations. My group doesn't, because we're relatively small team. I work very closely with some of our internal support teams to make sure that they're good to go on our products. I help support some of our developers when they're going through the process of implementing things on our platform. I keep track of a ton of operational metrics, how things are performing. So I guess, but I'm so wrapped up in my world and the way that it is, I'm not sure I fully understand the operational aspect that Jay is asking about. And if he wants to throw a comment in on YouTube to further clarify, I'm happy to say more words.
So that's great. Yeah, if you want to throw something else out there, we'll do that. In the meantime, I will switch gears. And yesterday, Shalane had asked a question specifically really around professional development and education. He's always curious to know, are there any books or resources that you lean on that you say, hey, this is a great book that has really impacted me as a product manager?
I'm literally leaning over to where two books are.
Excellent.
So one of the things we talked about yesterday was that sort of interview process and how to get into Google. When I started that process, my Google recruiter sent me this long list of recommended resources. Make sure I get it in the frame. This book is one of those recommended resources. I found it to be unbelievably valuable in terms of that interview process, having a framework by which to answer the questions, ways to think through the different kinds of questions you're going to get asked. They even have stuff in here about resumes and other aspects. I was at the point where I'm starting at a bunch of chapters in at that point because I was already into the interview part.
Yep.
But super recommended. Also, Gail has a number of videos on YouTube and around, and other, that you can get a lot of the same content.
Great.
So love that. I like this book, which was sitting on top of it. Come on.
Escaping the Build Trap. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Very Escaping the Build Trap. This is my stretchy bookmark in there.
Nice. What's that bookmark? I haven't seen that. We'll have to come back to that.
It's like a Bungie bookmark.
Oh, nice.
It fits in. Oh, it literally is called Bungie.
I like it.
And then just stretches to hold its place.
Cool.
Apparently I had like a sticker in there. Anyway, this book addresses some of the things I see people doing, building for building's sake. So that's that launches, not landings, and the whole stat that I don't remember who did it a long time ago, but it might even have been Microsoft. Sorry, out of frame. Okay. Who determined that like 2/3 of features do not add value. Like 1/3 add value, 1/3 are neutral, and 1/3 like detract from the user experience. Mm-hmm. And so don't just build, like, goes back to that incremental thing. Don't just build to build. And then the classic Mironov Art of Product Management.
Yeah, of course.
Always a favorite. And inspired, Marty Kagan, I think, inspired. Building products that people love is great. And there's a thread in another product organization that I'm in that I don't have open, where this guy Grant Hunter goes through a really great list of books that I'll grab his list. I'll drop it in LinkedIn or something at some point.
Okay.
But it's, a lot of the things you would expect. He mentions Escape the Build Trap as well. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People he puts in there. Some classics like that. I think Lean Startup is always a good book to read. I think The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz is a fantastic book. It's not explicitly about product management. It's about startups and running companies and some of the hard stories there, but it is a fantastic book. Nudge is a really good book about tiny behaviors and building habits and things like that. And then Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman. Super good book that like a ton of other books end up referencing the thinking that happens, the discussion that happens in that book.
So I will drop links to all of these also in the description down here for the replay for anybody that has the link. We're going to hide this one and make this only for our Product Coffee people for a little while. This is just kind of a little family chat. We may make it public later on, but so we'll also make sure that we have those links out there for everybody to grab and find easily. And I'm going to track down that bookmark that looked really cool as well. Jay did kind of come back and clarify, and I'm going to throw his comments up here. He said, thanks for trying to answer, but what he said is that he's been the operational product manager rather than the development product manager. So I'm thinking, new product versus life cycle product, right? So allowed both, ongoing directional control as well as that initial prioritization.
I see. I don't actually know then what an operational product manager does in that context. Like if you're not controlling the direction of the product in any way, I'm not sure the role that you have, and maybe it's mistitled as product management. But if you're not influencing the roadmap and determining which problems to solve for your users, I think you might have a different job than product management at that point.
Yeah, production operations.
Yeah.
No, maybe. But maybe we'll have a deeper discussion with Jay on that in a future Product Coffee. So
interesting discussion, yeah.
Eric did ask a question.
We should talk about, Jason? At some point, we should talk about the difference between product owner and product manager.
We totally should.
I think that would be fun.
You should. We take a long time on that one. It keeps coming up, but we can go into it here, or we can have a whole session on it. What do you think?
Maybe we should have a separate session. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. I talk about this quite often. I get a lot of people reaching out to me just because of the Product Camp network, asking, "Hey, do you know somebody that could fit this product management role I have at my company?" I look at it, well, that doesn't really look like a product manager role. Let's talk about it. And I've had a few of those conversations recently. And so let's get the right role.
Let's think that word means what you think it means.
Exactly. So Eric is on here as well, and he asked a question. We're going to get back into the life cycle of the product. What he wanted to know was, if, as you're evaluating your product in market, and a metrics, one of your key metrics starts to fall off, what is the process that you go through? How do you approach identifying your challenges and exploring the causality there, so that you can start to decide what kind of corrections you might or might not want to make?
Sure. This, not surprisingly, this happens in the real world and has happened to me. And so it even happened. It was sort of part of my role at the very beginning of my time at Google. The utilization of a thing wasn't as high as we thought it should be. And I had basically instinctually, I figured it was probably one or all of three potential causes, right? And so I did some first party research. Like I checked into some stuff. I talked to our developers. I looked at stats around similar products that we have at Google to see like what is the utilization of. So in this case, the product is this add-ons infrastructure, and in the right side panel of all of G Suite at this point, or sorry, Google Workspace at this point, there's that companion bar is what I call it, and it has calendar keep and tasks in most of the apps. Those are first party things, and then it has the ability for these third party integrations. What I was able to do is I was able to say, okay, if I look at those first party things, calendar keep and tasks, and look at the utilization of those, that is a decent proxy for what an excellent experience would be, because those are built in a slightly different framework. They're faster, they have more UI flexibility, stuff like that, because we don't have to worry about security and privacy as much because we built them and we know what's happening with all the data. And so it's like, okay, compare that set of metrics to my set of metrics, and then how is my product performing compared to that baseline? So do I really have a problem is the first thing to check. And then I worked with my UX researcher, and this is actually some of the times when she was like pushing back on the, do I really need to research this? It's like, I think it is one, two, or three of these three problems. My instinct is that it is all three. And she was like, I think your instinct is correct. Do you really need to do research to prove that out? Because both of us are operating at the low confidence, we haven't proven anything at this point. Like, how different are your decisions going to be if we do this research and it comes back, very strongly in favor of X or very strongly in favor of Y? Are you going to actually change what you're doing? Are you still is your plan still pretty much baked in as is? And I was like, actually, you're right. We need to have a plan to address all three, because they're all impacting the situation. And the only thing that I would potentially change is which one of the three I attack first. And so that was a really long-winded way of saying the approach I would have to this is to root cause it, right? You have a problem, understand the root cause of that problem using whatever means you have, research, metrics, benchmarks, customer feedback, satisfaction surveys, whatever the things are. And if you don't have a way of ascertaining what the root cause is, make one, because that is then like the most, if it's your key metric, if it's part of your OKRs, if it's the one metric that matters, so to speak, then you absolutely have to get to the bottom of it, right? If it's going down, like if you're an e-commerce company and say orders are going down, guess what? That is the number one most important thing you need to solve. And so all of your effort should be on finding the root cause. And then once you have that, like then you define the problem space, and then you can go and figure out solutions to that problem space. So,
the real job of product management really comes down to creating a crisp, clear definition of the problem, so that you can go find a solution and rely on the larger organization to find that solution. We used to joke about back in the Silverpop days that, my job as a product manager is to own the problem. So I am the problem, and the engineering organization was the solution.
You are the problem.
Yes, I am the problem.
But it goes back to my to the earlier question about the designer, right? So once I figure out the problem, and I use my UX research people to help me define that problem, and then myself. Then I work really closely with that person and also my UX designer and also my tech lead to start working on that solution space.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Because guess what? All of these people, I guess especially Google, are highly paid smart people.
Yes.
Right. No matter where you are, your developers are highly paid smart people, and don't treat them as machines to produce code, but treat them as highly paid smart people who have thoughts and opinions, right?
So absolutely.
That's my hug your developer comment for the day.
Hey, everybody, when you get off this call, go find a developer and give them a virtual hug right now. So
exactly. High fives, whatever it takes.
Yep. Well, so that is literally all, everything that I wanted to cover. I think that's a great idea for us to have a session on that, defining the different product ownership roles. Is it product owner? Is it product manager? And there's some other kind of specializations in there. I think a lot of people are really curious about product operations these days as well, and kind of where that layers into a product management organization. But just the product owner versus product manager clarity is a hugely important issue that I think we could spend some time on.
Yeah. There was one question you'd sent over from the chat. The section 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Somebody asked, is there a significant presence of product managers at Google located in Georgia? The answer to that is no, there is not yet. Again, all of these are my opinions and not the opinions of my employer.
Right.
Caveat. I think it would make sense for Google to expand the office. I mean, there's some announcement about a growth in the office. I don't know what kind of jobs are going to be there. You can look in like the Business Chronicle from 2019. There was something about new office space, basically.
Yeah. I remember that.
There is this, we have the office I'm based in is in Waterloo, Canada, because the University of Waterloo is here. Strong engineering school, can bring lots of developers on board. We have a fair number of product managers on site. We work on a bunch of different kinds of products in the Waterloo office. Everything from Stadia to obviously Gmail, Firebase. There's ads, there's all kinds of stuff up here. And I apologize to all the teams I'm leaving out. Google Cloud, that's a huge one. The preponderance of product management at Google is in the places you would expect it to be, right? Most of us are in California. There's a fair number in places like New York and Seattle. If it's a big tech hub, it probably has product management at Google. Because that has engineers at Google, and they like to co-locate product managers with engineers because it's such a tight collaboration.
Right.
So I think the same reason that there is a strong Waterloo office, there should be a strong Atlanta office for engineering. Georgia Tech, it turns out, is not a bad school for these things. No. And there's also places like Emory and Morehouse and a ton of other schools that are of extremely high quality. And every time I go to California and visit one of those offices, back in the before times when that thing kind of happened.
When you actually traveled around the country?
Yeah, when I actually saw humans in person instead of through pixels. I would see so many Georgia Tech sweatshirts at the various places. So I know they're hiring Georgia Tech engineers. It seems like it would be a no-brainer to expand the Atlanta office, but time will tell, right? I mean, we are all in a new normal. Work from home through June of 2021 is what Google has announced, and who knows what happens beyond that. Already places like Facebook, Twitter, and even Microsoft have announced, and plenty of other companies have announced work from home whenever for as long as you want. Various rules and restrictions based on that. I think this pandemic and this sort of lockdown thing has taught us is both the good and the bad of this remote working thing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the fears that companies had about it are being laid bare and shown to be not true. Like people can still be productive.
Yep.
I think JP Morgan found that their people were less productive, and so they want people to go back to the office. By all means, do that, right?
Yep.
And you'll hire people who are more productive in that environment. And people like Facebook, who say you can work wherever, are going to end up hiring more people who can be productive in this environment, right?
Yep.
And I think there's a place for both. So, sorry, that had nothing to do.
I think but I think it does. Well, it has to do with everything, the things that are on all of our minds. So I completely agree. Remote work is a skill set that it requires you to develop a skill set that you may not have already. I haven't come across anyone that hasn't been able to develop that skill set over time, but I think there are some people that certainly feel much more comfortable automatically, and there are some people who feel much more comfortable in an office with their colleagues. I personally exist in a kind of a different kind of headspace in that I prefer to be in an office with my colleagues, but I'm just fine working remotely. And I traveled so much in my previous role that you pretty much have to work remotely anyway, and you'll see different people. I'm looking forward to getting back with the people, but the remote work as a foundation, as a remote first, seems pretty comfortable for an increasing number of companies and people these days. So
yeah, I mean, and I think we live in a time of a little bit of magic where Google makes software that works in browsers that enables this. Other people make software that works in browsers and such that enable this. Like, if you think 20 years ago, the idea that we could have a real-time video conference in a browser and or run a full function spreadsheet software in a browser using HTML just seemed bananas.
Yep.
And so it helps that we have way better bandwidth. Can you imagine if this pandemic had happened in 1991?
Oh God!
Instead,
yeah, we would have
right,
been,
or 98 even, like when dial-up and slowdoms were still the thing. It would have been different. The technology infrastructure has enabled this in a fantastically interesting way.